A question we need to ask is, how much can we trust the operating systems and the applications that we use? Well, we know with 100% certainty that all of them contain security vulnerabilities and bugs. One approach to avoid bugs is to create non-complex systems, but this is infeasible. In fact, systems are getting more complex, which is one of the reasons security is struggling to keep up. Complexity is the nemesis of security. Another approach to try and help protect us from these known vulnerabilities and bugs is to use what is called formal methods in software engineering. Software is fundamentally a mathematical system. Therefore, you can prove the correctness of a system through testing and proving properties of that system. This way, you can provide complete evidence of correctness, meaning no matter what inputs the system receives, it will always compute the right values. This isn't a new concept. This formal process was originally performed by human mathematicians, which was feasible on programs with 50 lines of code or so in the past, but with today's systems containing millions of lines, it's impossible for a human to do. But what has happened recently is that both algorithms to proof and the computer power have improved enough that computers can do the proofing for us. Unfortunately, currently only the most critical software goes through formal methods like air transportation or process control systems. Formal process is still too time consuming and cost prohibitive for most systems. So most software testing today doesn't provide complete evidence of correctness proven mathematically. So we have to accept the risk of security vulnerabilities and bugs and mitigate accordingly, because we know security vulnerabilities and bugs will exist. It will exist in operating systems, it will exist in applications, it will exist in hardware, and it will exist in the tools that we use. So to mitigate this, we need to distribute trust, we need to reduce attack surfaces, we need to create isolation and compartmentalization and build layers of defenses. This will protect us from the bug-ridden code. All of these mitigations we go through in detail throughout the course. Let's talk about backdoors now in relation to your trust. A backdoor is a loaded term, it's a general loaded term. Let's just consider it as a term to mean a weakening of a system. And here you can see examples of backdoors, but you should probably take these with a pinch of salt, because some of them I actually don't think are potentially accurate. But there's a whole list of them from the GNU project. Potential backdoors in phones and applications, operating systems, etc., routers. Backdoors can be introduced by accident through human error or on purpose by an adversary. If something is closed source, the only way to find backdoors is through a process called reverse engineering. This is not feasible for most people and is also unlikely to find anything well hidden. With closed source, you have to trust the developer, which is not ideal. Open source systems have less risk of backdoors, potentially, as the code is open to public scrutiny. But using open source does not automatically prevent backdoors, which a lot of people think, and it certainly doesn't prevent security vulnerabilities that can be used as backdoors. With open source, if we download and use pre-compiled binaries, there is nothing to confirm that the clean source code published was used to build the binary you are using. Those who compile, distribute, and host the binaries can add backdoors. The binaries and signatures could be replaced by an adversary. Even if you create your own binaries from source code, there is no guarantee that there is no backdoor. You would have to have personally reviewed the source code before compiling it, which is often completely infeasible, or you would have had to validate the signature of clean source code before compiling it. But how do we know the source code is clean? Well, it's a hard problem. The compilers used by developers could be backdoored to create backdoors in the application they compile without the developers knowing. This happened to a pirated version of Xcode, which resulted in malware infecting apps on the Apple Store. Developers of the apps were oblivious that they were adding malware when compiling using this pirated version of Xcode. You will get backdoors forced onto you by legislation from nation states, which is an imminent problem. And backdoors can be very, very sneaky too, and difficult to spot. Just the slightest deliberate or accidental change in code can create a vulnerability, and it can create a backdoor. I've got an example here of Juniper routers being backdoored, and I'll read a summary here by Matt Green, who was part of an investigation into this particularly sneaky backdoor. For the past several years, it appears that Juniper NetScreen devices have incorporated a potentially backdoored random number generator based on the NSA's dual ECDRBC algorithm. At some point in 2012, the NetScreen code was further subverted by some unknown party so that same backdoor could be used to eavesdrop on NetScreen connections. While this alteration was not authorized by Juniper, it's important to note that the attacker made no major code changes to the encryption mechanism. They only changed parameters. This means that the systems were potentially vulnerable to other parties even beforehand. Worse, the nature of this vulnerability is particularly insidious and generally messed up. A very, very subtle backdoor. Clearly a nation state or an expert hacker group, but also interesting that it's based on NSA's dual ECDRBG algorithm, which is one reason why people don't necessarily trust the standards put forward by the NSA in the NIST standards, because they believe that they've been deliberately specified in such a way that some of them are deliberately weak. Personally, I think for anyone who really cares about security, privacy and anonymity, backdoors are a serious problem. Any tools you use going forward through legal methods, which is extremely worrying, or through hacking, will be a target of backdoors and weakening. Everything will be a target. Operating systems, encryption, security services, applications, and even the hardware and firmware. Any anonymizing service you can think of will be under attack from hackers, corporations, and nation states to backdoor them. And you can't just create a backdoor just for the good guys. Once you weaken security, you weaken it for everybody. So how do you mitigate the risk from backdoors? Well, we have deterministic and reproducible builds that can help to detect backdoors. So a reproducible build. Reproducible builds are a set of software development practices which create a verifiable path from human-readable source code to binary code used by computers. So that means the source code that a binary is said to be compiled from is genuinely compiled from it. With reproducible builds, multiple parties redo builds independently and ensure they all get exactly the same result. But this is easier said than done. The build system needs to be made entirely deterministic, and the build environment should either be recorded or predefined. Users also need to be able to validate the results. They need to be given a way to recreate a close enough build environment, perform the build process, and verify that the output matches the original build. So real, full, deterministic and reproducible builds take lots of effort and are hard to set up. Currently, to my knowledge, there are no fully deterministically built operating systems yet. There is good work going on in the Debian project, which is one of the reasons why I recommend it as an operating system for people who care about security, privacy and anonymity. If your operating system is backdoored, all your precautions fail, so it's vital your operating system is solid. Debian is taking strides to get there. If we look here, we can also see all of these we discuss later are also making strides towards deterministic and reproducible builds. And if you're interested more in the topic, maybe you're a developer, this is quite a good read by a gentleman called Mike Perry on deterministic builds in relation to Tor, but it's also a good read. And here there's a video on how to build your own software reproducibly.